We are live with the community. This is the Microsoft Power Platform community call for December 2024, our last one of the year, everybody. Wait, how did this happen? We are so excited, though, because we have got an amazing agenda in store for everyone. We're going to talk about our community resources, samples, some news and events. Of course, we're going to have that group picture time for Together Mode, so get those fantastic faces ready. And then we've got three amazing presenters for today, two of which are first-timers, everybody, so let's show them that community love. Eliane is here to talk about personal views for Power Apps. Super excited for that one. Daniel is going to step in and talk about recreating LINEST. I don't know what the right way to say that is, but we're going to say it how we say it. From Excel with Power Apps user-defined functions. I always love a function. And Keith Atherton, one of the best, is here to talk about full power, top 10 power optimization tips. So get excited for that, everybody. But first, guess what? There are resources available for each and every one of you. So if you're a new one here, first timer, we welcome you. Please, please, please come back. And we want to let you know that there are tons of resources that are available to each and every one of you in the community. And these are 100% free. We've got things like our Microsoft Community Learning videos on our YouTube channel. We've got our LinkedIn group for discussions, which is an open opportunity to collaborate with everyone else. We've got our open source tooling. We've got our sample galleries. April's going to talk about that in a few minutes. Of course, you need to remember all of these URLs by heart. There'll be a test at the end. No, I'm just kidding. No worries, no test at the end. But if you remember ak.ms/community/home, that will give you access to all of these things. And by the way, we got a new URL, community.ms. If you use that, it'll take you to our home site as well. So excited to start getting more involved in other areas of the community. Now, if you're watching today and you think, hey, I got some cool stuff to show off, how do I do that? Super easy. All you got to do is tell us. If you go to this form, ak.ms/community/request/demo, which I know rolls right off the tongue, all you got to do is fill out a form. Tell us what you want to talk about. We'll get back to you. Be patient with us, though, because we do got a lot of folks that want to present, and we want you to present as well. And don't overthink it. If you're thinking, do I have to show, like, I don't know, a flux capacitor, what makes time travel possible? Great, Scott. No, you don't. Show us what you are passionate about. If you have found value in something, a function, a sample, whatever, show us. I promise you, there will be others that find value in it, too. And if you need to be buddied up, if you've never presented and you want a buddy, let us know. We'll buddy with you. We'll present with you. We'll set it up with you. So it'll be a fun collaborative opportunity. All right. Did someone say badges? There are samples available, and those lead to badges. But first, let's talk about those samples with April Dunham.
Yeah, thanks, David. So we do have our Power Platform samples repo. We don't have any new samples to highlight this month. It is that time of year where people start winding down for the holidays, but we would love to see your samples there. We also have repos for prompts and for snippets. So we have 3 different opportunities for you to share the work that you have, whether you have a really cool Power Apps component or a template, a Power Automate flow, a prompt that you're using in AI Builder, or some YAML snippets that we're using in Power Apps or even Copilot Studio. We would love to see those, and they all roll up to the adoption.microsoft.com page. And a really cool thing, if you looked at AI Builder lately in the new prompt library, the prompts that we have from the Power Platform prompt repo are in the product now. So you actually have an opportunity to contribute directly to product by contributing to the repo and sharing your prompts with everyone. So we would love to see your samples, your prompts, and your snippets in the repos. Back to you, David.
Awesome. So you could say that they are going to power up the product. Yes, very, very cool. Awesome. Thank you, April. And speaking of support for that, if you've never contributed a sample and you're like, well, it uses GitHub, doesn't it? What is that hub of Gits, that thing? I don't know. It is strange. We are here to support you. Sharing is Caring is a program that provides hands-on guidance. That means that we join live Teams calls together, walk you through how to accomplish certain tasks, one of which is actually contributing to the community through GitHub. So if you've never done a pull request and you're like, I don't even know what a pull request is, come join. We will walk you through it. It's not recorded. It's a safe space. That means you can ask any and all questions without fear of it going on record. We all know sometimes we're a little hesitant to ask questions because of that. So it's a safe space, a fun opportunity to collaborate. We're getting more sessions scheduled, just back from vacation, so be on the lookout for that. ak.ms/sharing is caring. And once you do contribute, April had mentioned things like our prompt libraries, you can get a badge. So that means that these cool badges that are only around for a couple more weeks, everybody, Prompt Pro and the specialized 2024 badges, things like the Season of Getting, our Snippet Sorcerer, these are only available for a couple more weeks. So they are absolutely free for you to get. all you got to do is opt in and make a contribution. aka.ms/community/recognition will allow you to opt in. Just give us your email and your GitHub, and then we'll track your contributions and we'll award you for that. So it's a great way to show that you are making a difference in the community. These are real and accredited badges. So your managers, your clients will see that you are making a difference in the community. And like April said, you can actually impact what's going into the product. So that's pretty awesome. All right, what are some upcoming shows and events? We've got coming up mid next year, our European Collaboration Summit. It's actually a trifecta, the hat trick, you could say, of events. So we've got the European AI and Cloud Summit and European BizApp Summit. So I know a number of folks will be here. April will be there. I will be there. Hugo Bernier, I believe, will be there. So we're all super excited to see everyone there. Get signed up if you haven't, and we look forward to seeing you there. Of course, we have a lot of other events that are going on in and around the world. We are a global community, so we want to recognize that. These are some, I'm sure that we're missing some, but we'll get some more added in. You can always get access to all these by going to ak.ms/community days. That gives you access to all those wonderful events that the community is putting on. And it's a lot of hard work, everybody. So some of them are live, some of them are virtual, some of them are hybrid. So if you have an opportunity to support them, go support them. You're going to learn something. You're going to learn meet some new friends, and you're going to support a great cause and a lot of hard work that goes into making them happen. All right, let's move on to our news desk, and we'll go back. Or no, let me start with Shane. Wasn't able to be here, by the way. He came in, he said Copilot Studio 3 times, and then he disappeared. I think he's now part of the cloud and AI, and he's out fixing bugs somewhere just in the ether. But we appreciate it. We'll look forward to seeing him back next month. And then we got some news with April.
Thanks, David. So there's a few new things in Power Apps land. One, Smart Paste and Model-Driven Apps is now in public preview, so you can give that a try and see how that works. It's really cool. You can copy some text, say from a Word document in this example, paste it directly into your Model-Driven App form, and it will dynamically choose where to put all of the information into the right fields for you. So it's really cool. Definitely check that out. Also, React and Fluent components are now GA for Power Apps. There's a brand new Power Apps Pulse video that I did that went out recently along with the blog. There's a brand new UI for Canvas apps if you haven't looked at it. Lots of improvements in the interface for making and building your Power Apps and Canvas apps there, and updates to modern themes. So I know this is something David is passionate about here, but now we have complete control over all of the colors in your modern themes there. So I show a little quick video of that in the Power Apps Pulse. There's also an update to the Create a Machine Ordering Power App Learn module, or Learn path, that shows you how to build a Power App. So now you can see how to build model-driven apps, Dataverse tables, all of that. Lots of improvements there. And newsflash, we have an event that I want to announce that's coming up after the holidays here, February 12th, right before Valentine's Day, actually. Powerful Devs Conference is back. So we took a year off last year, but we are back in full action here. Scott Duro, Kendra Springer was going to be hosting this. We're going to have 9 sessions from community members, MVPs, Microsoft employees, and product team members. Leon Walicki is kicking it off with a keynote. And to follow it up, we're making it bigger and better this year with a 2-week hackathon where you can win a lot of prizes. So just go to aka.ms/powerfuldevs/register if you want to get signed up for that. It's completely free. It's online. Everyone can join. We would love to see you there and love to see you participate in the hack.
Awesome, thank you. But I think they're going to have a badge for that too, right? We're going to be designing one up here.
Exactly, yeah. Dave and I are going to be working together on a badge for that. So if you participate in the hack, you submit a project, you're going to get a badge.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So excited. All right, everybody, lots to be excited about in the new year. Well, what time is it? It is picture time. So get those cameras turned on, and we will get everybody over here. We got together mode going. So we'll see. All right, there's some familiar faces, Norm and Vessa. All right, looking great, everybody. So got some room. Stephanie's up there. Keith, a couple more seconds if you'd like. We're doing okay on time. Let me get this set up, and we'll do this, and we'll do that. And yep, Camtasia making noise. All right, still see some cameras turning on there. A couple more. We all look like we're in the Power Platform Protection Agency or something. Oh, there we go. Hey, look at all. Well, now it went bad. There we go. It's like coming in and out. All right, couple more seconds. Anybody? We got a few more seconds. I'll give it just, I still see some cameras turning on. That's great. All right, let's give it 3, 2, 1. Let's wave to the community, everybody. Looking great to see you all. Excellent, excellent, wonderful. Thank you all for everything you've done all year long and continue to do. You are the best part of our community and what makes us the best community in tech. So thank you all so much for everything you're doing. Great to see you. All right. let's get back. Ooh, that was weird. Get back to our regularly scheduled program. And for that, we will move on over. Smooth. That's not what I said. Smooth on over. Smooth on over. We're going to smoothly move on over to our demos. So Elaine is here. She's going to talk about personal views for Power Apps. Again, everybody, this is her first presentation on the community call. So let's show her some love. And Elaine, it is all yours if you'd like to take on over.
Thank you for your introduction, David. Yeah, it's an honor for me to be able to present here, and yeah, I am quite enthusiastic about the Power Platform, so I would love to share some example which I recently made. I created a short PowerPoint presentation just to have an introduction, and then we're definitely gonna move into a demo. I'm trying to present demo this if that works fine. Hopefully, no, you will.
Yep, just swap your display settings there. Yeah.
So I will just, it's fine if you just see this view. It's just a couple of slides. It's about the personal views. Probably a lot of you are do recognize when working and creating a Power App that you got the question, oh yeah, it looks quite nice what I can see, but can I make a personal view? And that was a challenge which I got often, and then we needed to come up with the real solution for it. And what were the requirements? To have a selection, which columns you want to see, that I need to be able to can kind of change the width of the column, and I also created the display order. All kind of inspired by the way we know we can do that in SharePoint as well, but then we wanted to do that in the Power Apps. A couple of steps we need to take. We needed to decide which columns needs to be visible by default, and then we created a list and a list with the actual data in which you are looking at and working into the app, and a place where we can store the information about a personal view. So that's kind of the background information. So let's move on to a real demo in a Power App example. Let's hope one moment. I need to switch over here. As you can see here, a Canvas app with just only the possibility for a personal view. As a data source, SharePoint list is used, as we can see over here. Just an example of some data in here, which we want to see in the Power App as well. And for this data, we would like to have a personal view available for every person who's working with the Power App. And as for the people who can read the screen pretty well, I can zoom in a bit. There's another list, the personal views. In this list, the actual data from the personal views is stored, like the user and the settings for the personal view. As you can see, this is kind of done in JSON format. So let's move on to the Power App, so to actually see how that is done and how to achieve this. On the Power App, there is a loading screen, and on that loading screen, there is a timer set, and on the timer, some data is loaded to actually get the Power App to work properly. The first steps is to load the data in of the actual data list. In this example, it's the job application tracker list with a couple of columns in it. Next to that, we would like to have a default view. Whether our user doesn't want to create his or her own view, he still needs to be able to see something. So that's what we created over here. And as you can see here, it's a view in which it's a collection in which we define some columns, like an ID, a name, if it should be visible or not, the width, if we can sort that column, and the order of the column. And while loading the app, we also get the data of the personal view list to check whether the logged in user already has a view available, or it's a new user or a user without a personal view yet. And then we create a solution in which we actually store the view we need to display. And when that's done, we automatically navigate to the next screen, like the personal view screen. So let's move on to the personal view screen. Over here, we do see the default view of the data we loaded in the loading screen. Over here, we can see the different kind of columns and the data which in. The structure is set up like just a header for a component, and then there are some containers in which the data is shown. As you can see over here, there is a gallery for the header. For each possible header, there is a text element, like we see over here for the job ID, and for everyone there is a button available to be able to sort that column. And for the actual data that is loaded, there is another gallery available. And for every text value, there is a column, and the settings are set to get the data from each column. Let's dive into some details of the setup over here. As we can see over here, in the on select of the sorting icon or button nowadays, it's set the column name in which we are able to sort the gallery beneath it. Over here, we set the sort column. So in this case, that's the job ID. And as we can see over here in the gallery with the data in it, we use the custom sort kind of variable to set the sort order to ascending or descending based on the switch the user makes. Let's click on it, and as you can see now, the 1, 2, 3 is the first item, and when I click on it, it's the other way around. The same ID is available for every other sort icon. Just I need to put over here, as you can see. So this is the default view available. So let's move on to this button, the view over here. In this site, and you're probably familiar with the SharePoint way of working, it looks a bit like the SharePoint creation of views. Here I can select which columns I would like to see. So no, city, I think that's not relevant for me, and remote, not relevant for me. And I can also change the order. I would like to have the company as the first column, and I also would like to have it like a larger column. Let's type in the actual demo mode of the app. And then I can click on apply, and as you can see over here, the different orders, the different settings are set, like the width of the columns, the order of the columns. So I have created my own view, and I can always switch back to the default view if I want to see what all my colleagues are seeing as well. And I can click on my view, and then I can click on apply and have my own personal view available. And over here, as I'll move to the apply button, and this apply button, it's stored like what's over here. This is a collection, and the apply button just actually saves the data into the personal view list in SharePoint, which was loaded in the loading screen to check whether I already had a personal view or there needs to be a new personal view created especially for me. So this is, I think this is a great way to kind of add some personalization into the app. And of course, we can think of even make this and brought this ID and come up to have some ideas of expanding and improving this concept. And you can think of predefined filters, for example, when only specific country values are relevant for me, or sorting values, and maybe even add the availability to add some custom sorting, because every user kind of has his or her own kind of wishes in using the app. And this way you can make that available. So yeah, a kind of good way of thinking, to think in a way the user would like to handle the app, different kind of scenarios, different kind of perspectives. So yeah, that's what I wanted to show you. And I can imagine that it went quite fast just for this couple of last minutes. I do have written a blog about it, in which the details are available. So if you would like to use it in your own app, feel free to use it. And if you do have some questions, please reach out to me, and let's make some fun in creating more personal power-ups.
Awesome stuff, Elaine. This is really, really cool and a very high use case. Excellent stuff. So thank you very much. Again, first timer, everybody. She did rocking it today, so appreciate it. Another first timer to the call, Daniel, if you want to go ahead and share your screen, feel free. He is going to be talking about recreating LINEST. I always feel like I say it the wrong way. LINEST from Excel with Power Apps user-defined functions. So correct me the right way to say it, Daniel.
Well, actually, David, I don't know. I assume it's LINEST because the thing we're trying to do here is linear regression. So I'm just gonna steal, lin from linear and call it LINEST in this.
Sounds good to me.
But it's in the eye of the beholder here. So say it however you want, as long as it makes sense to you. But yeah, thanks for the intro, David. Glad to be here today. I was kind of asked to step in for Shane because he had a conflict today, and so I was looking through the list of people in the call, and I recognized probably, I don't know, half a dozen names. So hello to those of you who know me. But I work with Shane at Power Apps 911. Yeah, so I'm glad to be here and kind of get to talk to the community for the first time on one of these Power Platform community calls. So let's jump into this. User-defined functions, right? How did this come about? Well, we teach an advanced class for Power Platform at Power Apps 911, and we taught one back on the 3rd of December. And we had a student in that class who had a really interesting use case, and he had a lot of really kind of messy code that he was trying to write to do linear regression calculations in his Power App, which is cool to begin with. This guy happened to be a machine learning guy who was building some tooling for, I guess, some of his colleagues in Power Apps, which I thought was awesome. So anyway, user-defined functions. This is not a new concept. These have been around for a while, but they're still experimental. So when we jump over to the demo, I'll show you how to enable them. And just, full disclosure, since they are experimental, be very careful using user-defined functions in a production setting. It's not recommended, but hopefully these will become available to us in preview and then ultimately GA someday, because they're really cool. So what are they? They're reusable named blocks of logic that you can define in your app to kind of centralize your complex formulas that you might reuse throughout the rest of your Canvas application. These are very similar to named formulas. So I don't want you to get those confused because they're not exactly the same, but they're in a similar vein, right? With named formulas, you can take expressions that you might use elsewhere in your application, and you can put them in the formulas property of your app. And then you can reference the name of that formula throughout your application. And you don't have to, keep putting the same code over and over and over throughout your app. So reusability is kind of the key feature here, right? Because it's a place where you basically set it and forget it, right? The wrongful appeal method. You put it in your formulas section, you can then update it, and it globally applies everywhere that you've referenced it, right? Your updates globally apply everywhere. So that really simplifies maintenance, right? Because you change logic in one place, it changes everywhere else. It's also better for organization of your code. So if you have, collaboration is a big thing in Canvas apps now. We have co-authoring. We have some things that we, are really enabling us to have larger teams of people to build these Canvas apps. And so having your, complicated code organized and in a single place where everybody knows where to find it, it's super helpful. So user-defined functions, right? There's a basic syntax around them. So just like with named formulas, they have kind of a unique syntax. So does user-defined functions. So as you can see down here, the function name is the first thing you put in, and then you open a parenthesis. So that's a little different than named formulas, right? Where named formula is just like the name of the formula you want to have and reference, and then you put in equals, and then you do whatever your logic is or your expression. Well, it makes sense that for a function, something that is going to have input and output properties, you would do it a little bit differently. So here you have the function name. You open it up, you open up the function, and then you define the parameters or the inputs that you want to put into the function. And so you can have, right, like input label 1, and then The data type. So, I mean, this should look familiar to all of us who use PowerFX on a regular basis, because this is essentially every single function in PowerFX works this way, right? You have the name of the function, and then you have the parameters of the function. The difference is, in this case, you're defining it. So input label 1, and then the data type, right? Is it a number? Is it text? So I'm going to show you here in a second in the demo. It'll make more sense, but the point here is you can define as many inputs as you want. Then you have a colon, and then you put the output data type. So what, when your function produces its result, what data type should it be when it comes back? Should it be a number? Should it be a string or text? And so forth. So once you've defined that whole first piece, you then put your equals like you would do with named formulas. And then you put your formula logic. And by the way, don't forget a trailing semicolon. You got to have that in order to split things up. So we'll see that as well in the demo. So best practices and limitations. I find that I'm not very good at naming conventions. I try to be. I pretend that I am. I tell my family I'm good at them, but everybody knows I'm not great. But if you can think of descriptive names for your input and output properties, that's ideal, right? Something that if another developer comes in after you, they look at it, they're going to know right away, like, oh, this means this, or this is very obvious what I'm supposed to put in here for these inputs. And then what comes out of the function, same thing, right? Like, it'd be nice to know what I'm getting back, so that it's not a big mystery when I go and try to use this in some piece of code that I'm writing. Also, document the function's purpose and the expected inputs, right? Use code comments. That's the easiest way to do it. If you have some other practice, if you maybe use Confluence or something to document your applications, that's fine too. I don't care how you do it. Just make sure you do it so that other folks on your team and other developers or makers are going to be able to understand what you've done there. And then make sure that you test everything, right? I'm also not the best at testing because I'm always in a hurry all the time. But make sure, if you are going to use this in a production application, which again, wouldn't recommend right now because it's still experimental, but if you do, make sure you test it very thoroughly before you just throw it out into the wild. Limitations. You can't have optional parameters right now. So this is something that I think might change in the future. A lot of functions that we use in PowerFX have required inputs and then optional inputs, right? And those optional inputs can produce some additional output. But right now, the only thing that you can do is have required input parameters. And this was a big one for me when I first started playing with UDFs. No record or table data types are supported for either inputs or outputs right now. Is there a way that you could potentially use the old untyped object in there? Potentially, but we're not going to go into that today because we don't have time. But if you must investigate whether you can make a record input or table input on your user-defined functions, I would point you toward the untyped object. Okay, so what's the challenge? Well, the challenge was, how do we do simple linear regression as a user-defined function? Well, like I said, this machine learning student that we had, he uses linear regression a lot, apparently, and he's building an app, and he stopped building his app because he couldn't figure out how to do linear regression formulas in PowerFX, but he knew he could do it in Excel. So when he threw out this idea, I took that as a personal challenge to go and see if I could produce some simple linear regression formula for him. And once I realized I could do that, then we taught it as part of the lesson around user-defined functions. So, what I'm going to do at this point is jump over to the Canvas app. Stop sharing, share. Here we go. So I thought what we could do first is just quickly point out that in order to get user-defined functions turned on, you have to go into the settings of your Canvas app. You have to go to updates and experimental, because like I said, it's still experimental. If you scroll down in through here toward the bottom, you'll see user-defined functions. Obviously, it's on for my demo here. but yours probably won't be. So you'll need to go and flip that on if you want to play with these. Also want to point out, I mentioned untyped objects, user-defined types. This could be another really cool community call topic in the future. Really, really useful, especially when dealing with things like SQL stored procedures that you're calling from Canvas apps. So could be a cool future topic. Maybe I'll make Shane do it. But enable user-defined functions. Okay, and once you've done that, you'll be able to go here to your app properties, and go to formulas. And this is where, if you've used named formulas at all, you would have your named formulas, right? Well, this is also where you'll have your user-defined functions. So let's just do like a really quick example, right? So we said that we have to have the function name. So let's do one that's just divide numbers, right? We open it up, we have our input. So I'm going to, like this is the label of our input parameter. So I'm going to say number 1, and the type is number, because remember we have to tell it what our data type is for our inputs. And we have number 2, and that's also a number. And then our output, you can see it's going to try to be helpful. Here are the types of objects that we can, or sorry, the data types that we can output here. These are the same for input as well. So I'm going to output a number as well. So then now that we've defined, the name of our function, our input parameters, and the data type for our output, we can put our equal sign, and then we can put the actual expression logic, right? So in this case, I just want to divide number 1 by number 2. And I'm going to put my semicolon. So now that is a user-defined function that I can use. So if I throw a label on the screen, I can come in here and I can say divide, and you can see it suggests my function name. And then it tells me I need number 1 and I need number 2 in order to work. So let's just do 6 and 2. And you can see, maybe because it's kind of small, but let me zoom in. You can see our output there is 3. So very simple, right? This is how you set up like the most basic possible user-defined function. But I think you can see where we're going with this, right? So let's look at a more complicated user-defined function. So trying to follow my own best practices and recommendations here, I've got some code comments on what I did for this approach. So the basic thing we're trying to solve here, right? The basic math is for linear regression. And so what we need to do is pass in a couple of known X points and a couple of known Y points. And so what we do is, because we can't pass in a table as our inputs, right? Remember, no tables are supported right now. We're going to pass in a string, a concatenated string with a comma delimiter of numbers. And so we take that, we split that into tables so that we can get our table values that we need. We convert those strings into numbers, and then we do the linear regression calculation. So we calculate the means of X and Y. We get the covariance of X and Y and the variance of X. We derive the slope and the intercept. And then the results that are going to come back, because again, we can't have a table as output. That would be preferable, but we can't. So we're going to return another concatenated string with the slope first and then the intercept. So I was thinking about rewriting this for you and kind of going through all this, but there's a lot here. So I'm just going to quickly kind of blow through this, and then we'll look at what the output looks like. But as you can see here, I created a formula called linear regression with 2 inputs, X and Y. And then my output is also text, right? Because I'm getting that concatenated string of slope and intercept coming out. So the first thing I do is I take those strings and I split them up for the X and the Y. I then calculate the number of points and the means for X and Y. You're going to see a lot of nested widths in here because this is kind of a compounding thing here. We need the outputs of each step as inputs of the next one. So if you're not familiar with width, here's another quick tip for you. Go research width. It'll help you every single day that you're coding in PowerFX. So yeah, we do our means of X and Y. We then take those and we can come in here and do our covariance of X and Y and our variance of X. Doing all summing things up. using our exponents, doing all of the math that we have to do. And by the way, I will post in the chat the link to Excel's documentation for LINEST, which breaks down all of the math of how I was able to put this in here and figure out and make it work. And then lastly, we do our slope and intercept calculation, right, by dividing the covariance of x and y by the variance of x. And we then produce our outputs, right? So text of slope and our comma, delimiter, and the text for intercept. So kind of a lot going on in there, but it's cool because now what I can do is in my app, I can have an x and a y text input. And then when I click my calculate button, I can call my function, right? So it looks much simpler, right? So again, if you think about what the point of user-defined functions is to simplify things. It's to make things easier to reuse, right? So imagine our student who had that giant formula everywhere in his app. Well, now all he has to do is put it in one place, and then he can call it like this, and it's super simple. All right, so I'm going to set a variable result. I'm going to call my function with my x and my y inputs, and then I'm going to set two more variables for the purpose of this demo, where I just split off the slope first and then the intercept. So now I'm able to come in here and say something like, I don't know, 2, 4, and 4, 6. And if I hit calculate, I then get my slope of 1 and my intercept of 2. So pretty cool, right? It was neat that we were able to solve this problem, and it was, it was neat to see how user-defined functions could have a practical use. And, I'm excited to see what they do with it in the future, because again, having this in one space where we can come back and edit it and have it cascade everywhere else globally through our app is really cool. Because if they come back later and they say, hey, we're going to make some additional inputs optional now. Well, great. I don't have to go change this in 100 spots or do find and replace in 100 spots. I'll just go change it in one spot, and suddenly that becomes available everywhere it's used. So yeah, I think that about covers it. I hope I was under my time there, David, but I will send it back over to you.
Awesome stuff. And I think this is a great example. Thank you, Daniel. Again, first timer, everybody. So let's show them some community love and really appreciate that. And this is a great example. It's a function, and it shows how to use value and all that good stuff. So excellent work. And I can underscore his recommendation for descriptive names. I used stuff and more stuff as my parameters, and my debugger started sending me passive aggressive messages and got a restraining order against me. So definitely use descriptive names. All right, Keith Atherton is up next. He's going to talk about full power, top 10 power optimization tips. Keith, you're sharing your screen. Looks great. Take it away.
Great. Thank you very much, David. Thank you. Wow, some great presentations today. I'm happy to be back. Great to see everyone here. So yeah, welcome to my session, Full Power, Top 10 Power Optimization Tips, just as David mentioned. So a little about me, my name's Keith Atherton. I'm a Power Platform Solution Architect. I get up to some other community shenanigans now and again as well, and I'm a Microsoft Certified Trainer. If anyone wants to connect, if you've got any questions afterwards, please do just scan that QR code or search for me on LinkedIn or X. Okay, so first up, let's look at why would we optimize. Now, we've seen Eliane, we've seen Daniel with these great presentations, things within Power Apps, but why would we want to speed them up or make them optimal for performance? So what we'd look at is improving that user experience, ideally improving the user satisfaction, and the key thing here is really to drive good user adoption. So it's something where we kind of want apps to really be enjoyable for people to use. They might even become champions or advocate for them or tell other people about them and just kind of have a bigger take up of the Power Apps. So really that's what we're looking for with this. Also, you may be on a project, whether it's an external customer or someone internal within your organization, where you might actually have a project requirement for certain response time limits. That could be when the app loads, it might be when a screen loads, something like that. This can be quite common in web application projects as well. So a bit of homework for everyone. If you're not already familiar with this, there are performance models that already exist where people have, well, quite likely teams of people have done the work to see, what kind of response times are we looking for? How do we want the app to work? So a common one out there is Rail. I believe that was developed by the Google Chrome team a while back. And Rail itself stands for R for response, A for animation, I for idle time, and L for load. So again, key things that we'd be looking for any app or web app, really to give a good user experience. So first tip, let's have a look. We're going to have a look at the app on start. Many of us might know this already. These are the actions that are going to run when you load up an app. So if you do too much work there, the downside might be it might take the app a while to load. So one of the alternatives to this is by using any of the screens. They've got an on-visible property. Looks a bit like this. So right here, I've got screen 1 selected. We're on the on-visible property, and we can set a few variables right there. Again, you might be pulling things from data sources or doing a bit more work, but this is where you can actually use this to kind of set things up like variables and so on. So with the screen on visible property, this is the behavior of the app when the user navigates to that screen. You can use this property, just as we mentioned there, we can set up variables and preload data. So why would we do it here instead of app on start? Well, really, if we do too much on the app on start, it might cause the app a long time to load, where when we distribute this load, this work throughout the app on all these different screens, the work's done ad hoc when it's needed. It's a bit more of a just-in-time approach. Okay, next up, tip 2. So another app on start property alternative, and we've already seen some good examples of this with those user-defined functions, but by using named formulas. So a quick look at where this is. Again, Daniel did a really good demo here, looking in a similar place, but in the app object, we've got the formulas property, and we can see we're actually setting a few different variables there. So we're actually hard coding some text ones. We're actually pulling from a data source as well. Now, the great thing with these named formulas, a few things really that are useful is that the value is always available. It's always up to date when you call it. The definition is immutable, which is just a fancy way of saying that you can't change the definition after it's been set in this formulas property. But most importantly for performance is that the formulas calculation can be deferred. So again, this is a bit more of an approach as when you call it, that's when you get the performance kicking in. So again, this is another just-in-time approach. If you call that formula, great. If you don't call it, you never take the performance hit. It's things like this, it can defer that execution. And also another bonus, again, along the lines of what Daniel covered in parts of his, is that this can improve reuse. Because we're using them here, they're going to have a global scope where we can access them from anywhere in the app, which means that any page or many different controls can refer to these formulas instead of us duplicating the effort and the code throughout the app. Really, really useful. So tip number 3, the concurrent function. So here's an example of some Power Effects where we're actually pulling from 4 different tables and storing them into 4 collections locally. So if we actually check the network traffic in the browser, we can actually see that these are run sequentially, as we'd expect. So we pull from the product table first, then the customer, and so on and so on. So these are actually run one by one, just as we'd hope. However, if you wrap these around a concurrent function, like this one right here, all of those calls would actually set off around the same time and actually just be working simultaneously or concurrently. So the benefit from this, if time across the x-axis there, horizontally, if that's the total time for this block of code to run, and let's say this was the app load time, we was doing this in app on start or even the screen on visible, we can clearly see that the one below, the concurrent one, is going to complete much quicker. So again, this will scale up if you've got multiple operations that you want to run concurrently. Next up, tip 4 is the with function. Again, we saw a good example there in one of the demos today. Really, really good example. Here's an example of it here used in a fairly basic way. So we're actually we're doing some lookups on the user's table, and we're retrieving a title, first name, and last name. Now, using this with block, we've actually going to store these variables temporarily, and then actually use them below with those set function calls that we've got. So the great thing with these, they have a formula block scope. So when we're done with them here, they're not actually accessible anywhere else. The big benefit, well, one of the benefits with this, really in terms of optimization, is that those records are cleared from memory when that execution is complete. So they're no longer retained in memory, taking up that valuable memory space. Another big advantage of this is that they can massively improve performance as well. So if you're going to use those record values multiple times, so in the example at the top, we've got 3 data source calls there, 3 trips over the network potentially. Now in this alternative block of code at the very bottom, we're actually just going to bring the record back itself, not just individual columns, and then refer to them below. So right now we've got 1 data source call in this new revised code, where the previous one had 3. So we can already see those trips across the wire, across the network, have been reduced. So again, we might get a really big performance boost from this one, really useful. Another bonus with this as well, a bit like the named formulas, is it can improve the readability. Again, with those with calls at the top, we're breaking something what might be a very large power effects expression down into multiple parts, so it's done in stages. So again, it can break it down to more lines, but make it more readable. Next up, tip number 5. So caching data where possible. So this is where we can retrieve and then cache, and cache is just a fancy way of saying that we're going to store something in local memory within the app. So this is where we can cache different bits of data using variables and collections where possible. So here's an example. We're actually going to bring the user's record back by doing a lookup on the user's table, and we're going to store it into a global user. Here's an example where we're going to bring it back, but just one of the columns, the title column, and store that into a variable as well. And the one at the end, this is maybe not advised, but we're going to grab all the users and store it into a collection called users. So by referencing this cache data in these variables and collections, it's going to be much faster than retrieving it from the data source. Now, why is that? It's because we're not going back over the network and potentially multiple layers across the network. If you're using a custom connector or some on-prem data gateway or something like this, you may go through multiple layers for your request, but also the response that gets returned as well. So by calling that memory, that in-app memory where we've cached everything, it's much, much faster. However, a few considerations with this as well. If we do cache that data, we need to consider how frequently we've been caching it as well. So how often does that data change at the source? If this is something that is a list of stores for your retail organization, it changes maybe once a month or once every few weeks. Doing a retrieval once a day or when the app loads is maybe going to be fine, potentially. But if it's data that's going to be changing every few minutes, then it may be that when you've cached this data locally, that data might become stale. It might become a bit out of date. So things like, how often does it change? And do you need real-time data? Because if you do, it may need that trip over the network to the data source. Okay, next up, tip 6 is patching records fast. So many of us used to calling patch functions a bit like this. This example, we're actually going to do a for all loop, go through all of the collection of accounts or call accounts, and then do a patch for each one. So this is a bit of a contrived basic example, but it's really going to go through them one by one by one. An alternative for that is by using the schema match approach. There's some really good blog articles out there as well. Matt Devaney, Microsoft Learn, has got some really good documentation on this. But this is where we've got less code, but also a bit like the concurrent function. These patch statements are going to run simultaneously. So it could likely be much, much faster taking this second approach. Next up, tip number 7, beware of data burst data model over normalization. Bit of a mouthful, but a bit of background on normalization. My background is mostly pro dev, lots of SQL Server, Oracle, and MySQL. And really with those different data models, we'd look to normalize the data model as much as possible. And really what that means is we'd look to reduce any redundancy. We wouldn't want any duplicated data in there or any kind of, reuse data in multiple places. We try and keep it as lean as possible. And sometimes it might lead to a structure that looks figuratively a bit like this. Now it is zoomed out, it's not intended to be readable, but really, again, a very, it could be a star or a snowflake schema where there's a lot going on, lots of joins, lots of foreign keys linking to other tables. And when I started with Dataverse, I tried to replicate this mindset, came back and bit me, wasn't a good idea. What I needed was something a bit more simplified, less joins, less links, something where, maybe there might need to be some duplicated data or some summarized data in some cases, but something that didn't require too many joins and links. So sometimes that can be a bit of trial and error. Next up, tip number 8 is implementing delegation where possible. So a bit of background on delegation. This is where if you have a PowerFX query within the app, that work is actually performed at the remote data source that it calls, rather than in the app itself. So the way I try and remember this is we're delegating the work from the app to the big powerful data source itself, whether that be Dataverse or SQL Server or something else. It means we're not having to bring all of the data back to the app and then do our filtering and sorting there, or whatever the case may be. It's all being done at the source where possible. So again, we mentioned there, only the required results are returned to the Power App. So that's really, really useful for performance because it's just potentially that smaller, reduced, refined data set that we need. And also delegation is possible with multiple data sources. So Dataverse, it's a first-class citizen of Power Apps, but we've also got SharePoint, SQL Server, and Salesforce as some other examples as well. Having a quick look at the Microsoft documentation, this is a screenshot of delegable functions and operations for Dataverse. So this can be very handy when you're writing any kind of PowerFX expressions. If I go through this table, I want to use the equals operator against some text. I can see, yes, it is delegable. But if I want to use a number and run the, say, search function right here, this is not delegable. And it will likely give me a delegation warning within the app itself too. So another thing to note as well is that Power Apps is limited to the first up to 2,000 records from the data source. So it's another reason why delegation is important, to just bring back the data you need and not attempt to bring too much of that data back. Next up, tip number 9, we're looking at the app checker. Many of us use this already, but this is great for highlighting errors and warnings for the following, and it can offer fixes as well. So things like formulas, runtime, accessibility, but also crucially for this session, performance and data source as well. The way we can see it right here is by, if we look at this stethoscope within the Canvas App Studio, we can see here I've actually got 12 warnings, not too good, for performance. Now 10 of those are for unused variables, and there are 2 more there for the rows retrieved from the data source may not be complete. Now the great thing with this detail is we do get the location of where the issue is, how to fix it, and why we'd want to fix it as well. Really, really useful. And the final tip, tip number 10, is the Power Apps Monitor. So it looks a bit like this when we use it. This is where we can actually see a list of the operations that have been called. We can see whether they're successful or not. We can see things like duration of how long they took. But on the right-hand side, we actually get more information. We can get more details, the formula where it's called, but also the request and response if it's something over the network as well. In this case, it's patching a row. And it can be quite verbose, but it could be useful if you really need it for troubleshooting. That might include errors, but also performance as well. So the great thing here, we can view events while building apps in Power App Studio. Also importantly, you can view events for published apps during runtime. So if you can't open up the studio, it's something in production or something somewhere where you can't open up the code and walk through things, it could be really useful for troubleshooting there too. You can check valuable information such as the duration of requests and errors that I just mentioned too. And you can access this using the app checker or the advanced tools. Really, really useful if you need it. So we've reached the end. Thank you very much for your time, everyone. Again, just reach out to me if you have any questions at all. Always happy to help. Thank you, David and team, for all you've done this year in the community. It's always a pleasure to be on these calls, and it's great to wrap up the year with everyone. So I'll hand back to David. Thank you.
Amazing stuff, Keith. Thank you very, very much. Really appreciate that. I always love those tips, and the way you present them makes it very digestible and applicable for all of us. So thank you. And a huge shout out to Eliane and Daniel. Of course, Keith, all 3 of you were rock stars today. We appreciate everything you're doing in the community. Again, along with everyone else, either on the call live or watching on demand. You are all amazing. We really, really appreciate it. All right. Well, let's talk about some resources that are available to each and every single one of you. We've got our helpful resources, things like our communities, video samples, all of which are available for you at no cost. Of course, these are all free and contributed to by folks like yourself, so we appreciate it. So thank you very, very much. If you like this call, well, we got more. So don't forget about our weekly series that's on break for the next couple of weeks. So just be aware of that. But after the new year, that is a weekly series with Microsoft-only speakers, which means that you're going to get it directly from the horse's mouth. Yes, that's right. So those project managers and product managers are going to be there to share cool things and features and opportunities for everyone. So don't hesitate. Don't miss out. Of course, this is the monthly Power Platform. We've got our Office add-ins and our bi-weekly sibling calls, the Microsoft 365 and Power Platform Community, which is tomorrow at 7 a.m. Pacific. And Viva Connections and SharePoint Framework, those are always on. No matter what, you will find them, no matter the status or state. We are there every Thursday. You can get access to all these calls at ak.ms/community/calls. And if you want to impress your kids, you want to tell them that you're cool, join our Discord server. You can be part of 2,400 plus other members of the community. This is a great kind of one-stop shop where everyone collaborates on a variety of topics. So it's a wonderful way to collaborate and get to know other members of the community. You can get there by going to aka.ms/community/discord. And you can also provide feedback. So if things are going well and you'd like to learn more about the community, or you'd like to provide some, I don't know, feedback, I know it's kind of self-explanatory, but if you'd like to say we're doing good, we'd love to hear it. If you'd like to see things improved, we could hear that too. Just please keep it positive. And this helps us show the management that these things are valuable to you in the community. So really, really appreciate everyone for all that you're doing. Well, the recording will be available in 24 hours or less on the Community Learning YouTube channel. So go to ak.ms/community/YouTube. Get subscribed today. It'll let you know as soon as things drop. We are also on X. We're also on Blue Sky. I need to get this slide updated, so I apologize for that. But we are on Blue Sky under community.ms. If you'd like to join there, it's the new hot social network that everybody feels at home for. So definitely take a look. It's pretty cool. We're also on LinkedIn, of course. The next call, January 15th. Next month, we look forward to each and every one of you again, ak.ms/Power Platform Community Call. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of the year. Enjoy if you're taking any time off, and we'll see you in the new year. Bye-bye.